Code Talkers, the heroes of World War II. Imagine spending 2 to 5 years of your life in a war and not getting thanked for it. Imagine training for weeks in an area that is new to you. Finally, imagine being able to help America win World War II using your native language through fatal secrecy and hard work. In 1941, during World War II, the US forces were having struggles with communications. They were making several codes. However, most Japanese cryptographers were solving these codes very quickly. Japanese codebreakers were educated in America and could speak English fluently, so the Japanese were easily breaking through the codes. This resulted in multiple losses of lives. A few months before, Philip Johnson, a retired World War I soldier, read an article on the military security and wanted to help them. From the age of 4, Philip lived on a Navajo reservation, and the memories of their language came back to him. In February 1942, Philip, after forming a plan, traveled to Camp Elliott. There, he tried to convince Lieutenant Colonel James E. Jones, the Marine Signal Corps communications officer, to make a code based on the Navajo language. The Navajo language was very complex and had no written form, so it was very good for being changed into a code. Lieutenant Jones agreed with Philip and decided to set up a test. Johnson went out and sought out 4 Navajo men who were bilingual. Multiple tests were given to the Navajo men. Most of them proved successful. Thus were born the Code Talkers of World War II. Carl Gorman, a Navajo Indian, was 36 years old, which was too old to be considered for a military service. So like many others, he lied about his age to be accepted. Carl Gorman was one of the 29 Navajo Indians on a mission to develop the secret code. The Navajo Code Talkers were very modest about their work. In an interview, Carl was asked how they memorized the code so quickly. He replied by saying, "For us, everything is memory. It's part of our heritage. We have no written language. Our songs, our prayers, our stories, they're all handed down from grandfather to father to children. And we listen, we hear, we learn to remember everything. It's part of our training." During the war, Carl was hit with malaria, but still continued to fight. He later developed shell shock, which is trauma from being exposed to the war, and was taken out of battle. Chester Nez was the last living original Navajo Indian code talker. He was one of the 4 men who were able to attend a medal ceremony in Washington, D.C. Charles was given a Congressional Gold Medal from President Bush in July 2001. In an interview, Chester said that everything was strictly secret. He could not tell even his family members about what was going on.
I'm very lucky to say that I came home safely. There's something that was very secret, and we couldn't talk about what we went through to our families. Everything was strictly secret.
The Navajo weren't the only Indian tribe to become code talkers. There was also the Comanche and Meskwaki. 27 Meskwaki men were enlisted by the Iowa National Guard. Most men joined because they knew it was only their duty to serve their country. Out of the 27, 8 were selected for special training. A part of their training was in Camp Dodge, Iowa. During their training, they had to learn how to use many pieces of machinery. It took a military machine 4 hours to decode a message, while it took a Comanche code talker only 3 minutes. Some men reported the movements of the troops out on the battlefield in North Africa. They carried radios and wires on their backs to code messages. The other men were radio operators. They had to learn how to work the inner parts of many machines so they could understand and translate messages. While the Meskwaki were in North Africa, the Comanche were mostly overseas and in Europe. One of the men in the Comanche group was Charles Chibity. He helped make the code that the Comanches used. Charles held his position as a corporal by fighting in fierce battles, such as D-Day and Normandy. Ralph Wanhee was another Comanche code talker. Ralph met a girl named Becky when he was 14. They fell in love and were later married. They were married for 42 years before Ralph died. Years went by before Becky ever knew anything about Ralph being a code talker. Ralph was given a Congressional Gold Medal at a ceremony. Becky still has Ralph's medal.
With the medal in her hands, Becky fondly drifted back in time to the 1940s when she and Ralph, the love of her life, first met.
They told jokes about what happened when they were in the service, but they never mentioned what they were doing.
The Code Talkers were very serious about their work. During their training, it was hard for them to adjust because of the harsh environment, but they did. The American Indian men survived the tough training, but on the battlefield, many lost their lives. They couldn't tell anyone about what they saw, heard, or did. America didn't even recognize the Code Talkers till decades later. When the war was over, the men came back home and were treated like warriors in front of their families. However, America stayed silent. It wasn't until 1969 that America recognized the Code Talkers nationally. That was 25 years after the fighting had stopped. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan made August 14th National Navajo Code Talkers Day. Then, on December 21st, 2000, Bill Clinton passed a law which congratulated the 29 original Navajo Code Talkers with the Congressional Gold Medal. Later, on November 15, 2008, George W. Bush signed a law that gave all Code Talkers a Congressional Gold Medal. The Code Talkers fought along with the Allies against Germany, Italy, and Japan. Just like soldiers, Code Talkers went onto the battlefield, but not in the same way. Some carried radio machines while others walkie-talkies, but they all fought. The soldiers used guns and the Code Talkers used their native language. It was very serious. The messages could affect how many lives were lost, or if they would win or lose the battle. Some were as young as 18 years old, and some even lied about their age so they could join the group. Code Talkers saved many lives with their code. They also potentially gave the U.S. the upper hand. The Code Talkers facilitated the communications and were able to keep coordinations and information secret. The Code Talkers took a stand in history by not only risking their lives, but also by using the language that they grew up with to give America great advantages. They also risked the trust of their loved ones. The time that could have been spent with the family was gone. The time that could have been used to have a normal life was given up to America. But in the end, though, they were proud to have saved thousands of lives, proud to have served their country, proud to have helped the United States of America win World War II.